Hey, welcome back to the Dynasty Grind. My name's Peter Howard at P8 Howdy on Twitter. I don't know why my camera's doing a weird thing. Welcome back. We talk about fantasy and Dynasty fantasy football specifically every Wednesday at 9:30 till close, till we run out of comments or get too tired. So settle in. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, put them in whatever chat box and whatever platform you're listening to them on. Tonight we have me, as always, and Zach Reed. No Dynasty Outhouse again, but that's okay. The more time he spends away, the less tired of us he'll be when he comes back. And it's rookie season. I have been running through my running back ranks, and I'm trying to make a podcast for the Dynasty Crossroads this week on it, which leads me to this position where I'm looking back at my wide receiver ranks and thinking, why do I have that guy there? Because I only did it once and I haven't gone back to him. Like, I remember liking Troy Franklin, and I just scanned over to my wide receiver ranks. I'm like, why is he so low down? So I don't even know my own ranks very well, but we're in it, and we're about it, and yeah, looking forward to chatting with you all. Thanks very much. Hey Zach, how you doing?
Not bad. That the new open throws me the
yeah, right. It's that pause at the end that gets me. I think I need to trim that off because I'm like, okay, we're not. I'll just stand here for a minute. Where are you at in your rankings journey? I imagine it's a bit different when you have to grind through like hours of tape for each player. Like you're very familiar with what you think of a player by the time you're finished. But me, I spend a lot of time on each player, but it's in spurts. I do a bit here, a bit there. And so when I go back and look at the list, I'm like, I don't recognize these ranks. You know what I mean? I have to go read my own notes.
So that's the whole. So I got 29 so far write-ups done. So I can go back and look and say this is what I saw. So like going through each of the players, and I haven't really started doing tight end quarterback. Like I've watched Brock Bowers. He's done. And I started on Jatavian Sanders, but I've done, like I said, 29 between wide receiver and running back.
Yeah.
And I still have more. There's still more guys I need to watch. Like as always, it never stops. There are always going to be players that I haven't got to, or somebody. I talked about this on the Dynasty Dummies episode from this past week, but like I'm always at this point listening to people like you and like JJ Zacharyson. And there are a bunch of different metrics analysts that I like, David Wilsey with running backs. So like there are a bunch of people that I kind of listen to now and go, oh shoot, I haven't put eyes on that guy. But in terms of the players that I have watched, like, yeah, I got a pretty good handle where I've got them and what I think.
All right. Well, it's probably going to be mostly me asking you about your ranks this week, because where we switched, I don't think that affects anything, but where I'm not streaming through DLS StreamYard anymore, and then we missed last week, I think everyone forgot we were alive. Or that we ever were. Hang on. Making jokes about creating a website, and I got a message today, an email, as the kids would call it, because it's an email, saying I've been charged for a website hosting service that I owning an address. And I was like, I don't own any website addresses. It turns out I do. I registered one like 2 years ago, and I've been quietly charged for it without noticing. And I was like, hey guys, why do I have this? I'm like, I guess you have to start building a website. And I was like, which Excel function is that? Anyway. But yeah, Fantasy Cares, thanks very much, man. We were not in Vegas last week, but
Bob was in Vegas. Bob and Scott Fish were in Vegas last week, so he missed us because he was in Vegas, but we missed the stream because Peter is a romantic at heart and did a Valentine's Day date, and I sat on the couch and watched rookie film.
Yeah, my wife and kids wanted to go to a restaurant in Richmond, which means I had to go to drive them, basically. That's why I got to go. So, they needed a lift. And I enjoyed food. JC Troller. Funky bass. There is some funky bass in that one, isn't it? All right.
Rookies, Pete, I guess.
Let me quiz you. You like Corum?
Corum.
Say that one.
Corum, yeah.
Running back one, but that's basically because I see no better option. And there's the least squintiness to his profile. What do you like about him?
And it is. This is a funny running back class because it's not. We've been spoiled with high end players, so it's been Bijan, it's been Brees Hall, it's been even like. I guess back to Saquon, but there were a couple in between there whose names escape. Jonathan Taylor, Swift. Like there have been some really like high end talented running backs. We've kind of been spoiled, and this class is not that.
I don't think it had. I'm trying this on the podcast as well. There's definitely a running back in here who matters, like more than.
Oh, there are more than one. Yeah.
But there is not a running back profile that matters more than your average bear in this class. It's like I said it before. It starts at Tank Bigsby and works down profile wise. I'm sure there's a better player in there, but I tell you what I got because I write mine down, unlike you. Let's see. Spent 2 years as Michigan's running back 1.6, 1.7 adjusted yards per team attempt, which is solid. It's about the average for a top 12 player. Not that means too much, which is pretty much what my podcast is about. And he's on the same team as Zach Charbonnet and hit about the same level, in other words, which is literally where this class starts back in 2019. Relatively low receiving game usage, though, with only 5% of targets or less in his time in college. Did hit 9% per game as a running back 2 in 2021. But that's still only 2 targets per game. Doesn't hit your three receptions a game, which doesn't hit your 3 receptions a game threshold. Or I think you have said at 30 or something.
No, 20. So he did. He had 24. So he's got one of those under his belt, but it's not a resounding. He's not a player that.
Yeah, it's
this is a receiver. He's a player that you look like that. He's he can catch.
I mean, he's not going to bat it away when it goes to him, something like that. As yards after contact and elusive marks are just above average, but again, that's kind of what I'm trying to make my podcast about. Like it's number go green analysis. It's not better because it's higher or lower. It's just he's doing the job. But he was also spelling mistake. Who would have guessed? Scoring above average points per game based on the age he was playing, which I like. It's a fairly effective metric. Fantasy points actually do a relatively decent job. I think essentially because if you're going from a decent conference and scoring above average fantasy points for the age, it highlights things the NFL is going to like. Touchdowns, in other words. How do you spell terrible? There you go. Which doesn't show terrible results for running back if you're looking to judge a player's effectiveness relative to his conference, which he did fairly well at. That's what I got. I mean, he carried a workload. It was a decent level of the team's overall offense relative to how much they were rushing on passing the ball. He caught the ball a little bit, enough that he's, could get involved in checkdowns and whatever else, but you're not expecting too much. And the reason he's won is just because there's like a few profiles, and he's coming from a place where you should expect there's a decent expectation of draft capital, right? Where was he from?
Michigan.
Michigan, yeah. He could easily get top 3 round pick or something. And most of them are some sort of there's some imbalance. Either they're playing in a place where you have less draft capital expectation, or there's worse production. It's kind of one or the other. And he's kind of even Stevens across the board. But that's my nerdy way. What do you like him most?
So, and your numbers aren't going to tell you this, but Corum also had at the end of 22 knee surgery. And so he tore his meniscus, had meniscus repair. It's a 6-month rehab. So like he wasn't quite as bursty as he had been. But again, that's something you kind of expect him to come back. To me, like Corum has great vision, both inside and off tackle. I think he can win in the short yardage situations with decision making, but he's a little bit undersized. He's kind of a Kyle Lebrecht would love him. He's a bowling ball. He's like 5'8", like a little over 200. He's good at gaining leverage and blocking, which is not something you necessarily think of in terms of fantasy points, but it also puts him on the field. It helps him be
that only
in
works if he's effective on the field.
But puts him in situations where he can be on the field in situations where they're throwing, which leads to potential receptions. He's good in blitz pickup. He's pretty smart about that. He's very quick to the line of scrimmage. So combine that with vision, and he ends up with 5 or 6 or 7 yard runs where the team will block and get him a hole, and he's like, "Yep, through the hole, through the line, and into the second level before the defense realizes he's there." He does struggle to beat initial defenders once he's through the hole, though. So like his kind of second level vision and ability to escape those defenders is a little bit lacking. He doesn't have much power, but he's smaller. So like he's not going to move a pile. He's not going to get much more yardage than what is blocked. And I don't think that he has enough speed to get to the outside consistently. So he's more of a inside between the tackles guy than he's going to be an outside runner. So it's a little more Devin Singletary than it is, somebody like DeAndre Swift or Gibbs who can get to the outside. He reminds me, and I hate comps, but like I can't help seeing the Kyron Williams, like looking at him and the athleticism being a little bit subpar, but still being able to carry that workload, being adequate in the passing game. Like that to me is what Blake Corum looks like. And a lot will depend on landing spot. I don't think we're going to see a first round running back this year. We may not see a second round running back this year, but we'll see one because the NFL is thirsty. So it's going to be, does Corum go in the second round or the third round? Does he go to a place that is potentially going to use him early? But he can do everything that you want a running back to do coming out of school. And I think he's going to get better, stronger, like burstier with more time coming off that meniscus tear.
All right. Yeah. All right. He's fourth overall according to DLF, so we're both wrong. Apparently, he's not that good. I like there's a
J Mike's comment. How do you spell terrible? Is a hilarious summation of the running back class, and he is absolutely right.
I'm glad he caught that. I think injuries are kind of a concern with both of my top two actually this year. Alan Davis, I took a short break after the season, ready to get to 2024. That's the way to do it, man. Welcome back. Joe McCarthy, how do you spell? Yeah. The value of the running back class will go up as the season progresses and injuries mount. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of players that will start to become more trade worthy and trade bait topics. Apart from the ones who hit, and like say, profile wise, there's no clear one. But the one who ends up being Devontae Freeman's value is going to escalate. Everyone else is going to fluctuate in that mid-range value where you can add something and maybe get a first.
Well, and that's to me, and Alan, this point is kind of the way I would attack this running back class. And if you haven't listened to, I think it was midweek last week, JJ Zachariason, his podcast, and he brought on at Charles Chill, whose name escapes me right now, but I know who he is. But JJ brought him on, and it was it's Scott Connor. And so Scott and JJ talked a lot about this class and had a very similar kind of idea about how to attack this group where you can trade down within this running back group, trade down spots, and still have a similar value, still have a similar player, but gain picks, gain value, gain. So this running back group, there are going to be players that hit.
Yeah.
It's going to be really difficult to pick out those players because the skill level of the first 5 and then like the next 6 are very similar. And so it's really, to me, a matter of moving back, picking up, whatever player is available, not necessarily thinking that you're going to hit, but thinking that you can gain extra assets and still have the similar chance of hitting on a running back. It's all going to be kind of a scattershot luck approach with this group because nobody really stands out. I assume that you had Jonathan Brooks as your 2. Is that right?
Yeah, it's running back 1 on DLF, so we're getting something right, I guess. My notes literally start, whoa. Borderline running back 1 profile, borderline. In the 2024 running back draft class, well. 2.9 targets per game. His ceiling was like an 8.5 target share. 1.7 adjusted yards per team attempt, which is about good. He doesn't wow off the bat, but there's top 12 potential in his median instead of his top tier range of outcomes, barring the draft and landing spot potential. His elusiveness rating and yards after contact, both above average. Again, it doesn't matter if it goes green, but he's doing the job. And he's doing it with volume, which is what struck me the most on Brooks. It's missing from a lot of this class. As well as suggestions he won't look too shabby if you're watching players play. I took a guess there, but there you go. Bijan Robinson, he ain't, but he's what we hoped Rashawn Johnson could look like. Without Bijan, was more involved in the receiving game in his time at Texas. And I've got him 2, and honestly, you could flip into 1. The only note that I didn't write down here, because I haven't read about it yet, like you were saying about Crumb's injury, I just don't know that stuff yet. But I do know it because you said he suffered a ACL, wasn't it, back in November?
Yeah.
And so you got to worry if the NFL worries or if he is actually fully what he was.
It's probably a redshirt year, honestly, for Brooks. Like so he to me has the high, and you said it. He's got the highest upside. He's got the most potential out of anybody in this class. But for me, the way I play running back, he doesn't work. Like I've got him as my running back 5 because of a few things, but a big part of that is you're not going to have him this year. Like he's not going to probably play this year. And so if the bet on running back is they hit early and you can flip them, or they hit early and you can use them, having a running back that is going to be a nothing for a year is a hard first round pick, and a hard, like, if you're going to take him at RB1, you're going to take him around 107, 108, 109. Like that's hard to be making that bet. And so again, like, really good burst and quickness to the line of scrimmage, has excellent contact balance, finishes runs strong, has good secondary acceleration. Like, I like him to the hole, but then also once he gets through, he's got that extra gear. I think he's got really good vision inside, and again, being able to get off tackle. I don't think he's a sudden cutter. I don't think he makes very many players miss. He's more of a straight line runner than he is, go get an angle and then cut back and make. He's not going to Barry Sanders anybody. And his speed parallel to the line of scrimmage is lacking. Like, he's not going to get to the outside, not going to be that guy who gets around the corner. But again, like, there's a lot to like with this profile. There's a lot to like with what he did. He's an adequate pass catcher. He had 25 receptions in this past season. But again, a redshirt year for a running back that you're going to have to spend a late first or an early second on is a hard sell for me.
Yeah. No, same. I think this is a really good class in that we like to spend a lot of later draft capital on running backs, just line them up and knock them down. And there's plenty of players in this class you want to spend thirds, fourths for sure, but even mid to late seconds. Filling out the first round this year is going to be difficult unless you get real comfortable with just taking shots at wide receiver, which just feels like you're a dynasty nerd just who loves pain because we know how often they miss. But yeah, that's what this class is. I actually put Braylon Allen third. He's second overall for DLF. I was talking to you about him before the show, and it's like, yeah, it's there, but he in no way stands out above the players we've mentioned and a couple of others. He's doing it at a significant conference level. We should expect him to be drafted. The real reason I dropped him there and put him in a separate tier is because if anyone think this guy stands out compared to the other two we've mentioned outside of injuries, then I'm on the under. Like, that's it. It's like, good, solid. But if you think he's at tier one stamp, then it's just because you've been looking at this class too much. You've forgotten how good things can be, as it were. And as it is, I think he suffers mostly from my process in that I go back and look at team history, and there's that Jonathan Taylor, not 3 or 4 years ago, and you look at the two lined up and say, running back one, Braylon Allen. And he's fine. He's like, compared to this class, over 40% of rushing attempts, 1.7 adjusted yards per team attempts, somewhat involved in the receiving game. I forget exactly how much. This is why I read, damn it, Zach, instead of trying to do it off the cuff. His target share is over 6% for 2 years, so that's pretty good. But then you've got Jonathan Taylor above, which is like Allen's max at rushing attempts is like 48%, and that's where Taylor started. And his max at target share is 6%, and again, that's where Taylor started. He was a much bigger part of that same team's offense 3 years, but again, it's not the same team. It's moved off the entire team's cycle by the time Allen comes along. You've probably got different coaches, so it's a little unfair. It's mostly because, he's fine. He's very good prospect for this year's class, but I definitely don't see anyone that stands out. And if I can't see anyone that stands out, I'll take the guy that people don't think stands out because it's of a kind. I mean, outside of the injury, Brooks stands out a little bit, but yeah, he's fine. But I put him overall third. So many party hat guys. Thank you, Dave. What did you think of Allen?
Very similar thing. He's a big back, 6'2", 238. So, like, if you're looking for that prototypical size, like, he is the running back in this class that kind of is that big, can run through everybody. I think Allen has tremendous patience. He lets his offensive line set up and block for him, which some guys don't do. Some guys get a little impatient, run up the back of their blockers. He does not do that. He doesn't seek out contact, which I think is an important distinction, but he will deliver punishment. And so, like, he's not going out of his way to hit defenders, but if a defender is going to contact him, that defender is going to pay for hitting Braylon Allen. I think he is adept enough as a pass catcher to be used in screens and as a safety valve and that sort of thing. I don't think you're going to line Braylon Allen up wide and throw, downfield, or you're not going to run him out on wheel routes and have him go 25 yards. He's also not going to run away from people, but he can run a long way. So, like, he's fast enough to break off a chunk run 25, 30 yards, but he's not going to Nick Chubb go, 70, or he's not going to Derrick Henry and have that big, long breakaway. He's a chunk runner. Sometimes his patience turns into being hesitant behind the line of scrimmage, which is not the best feature. As a big running back who doesn't start and stop quickly, hesitating at the beginning of a run is not great. He's also susceptible to being tackled low. So he runs a little bit out over his feet. And so if there's traffic down at his feet in the hole, he can be taken down that way. He also, again, because he's not quick laterally, loses to that initial defender far too often. And he's just not going to be fast. He's going to be a grinder. He's going to be somebody who, a team can give the ball to in the middle. It feels a little bit, again, like he's a 2-down grinder with probably a 25 or a 30 catch cushion. But again, that's if he gets a role where he's starting and getting touches.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that kind of matches up. He's probably going to do fine, but
yeah, I mean, he's not bad.
Just willing to bet the under. Let's see. Oh, Bob's back again. I have a minor crush on Xavier Worthy. I have a pretty significant crush on Xavier Worthy, but I'm trying not to push it too hard. Because
wide receiver 3 for me.
Yeah, I think being moderate on Xavier Worthy is going to excite other people. If I push my excitement for Xavier Worthy, I'd probably push it too far. But yeah, it's wide receiver 3 for me too. You want to get to running back instead, Bob? Is that what you're basically telling me? A wide receiver? Yeah, Worthy 3 for me. Let's see, what did I say? I did this on the podcast a few weeks ago. High A dot, high slot, relative to his A dot. It's a weird group getting granular on these roll buckets. Worthy's 2 hit comps are Darnell Mooney and Zay Flowers, and they're both fairly recent. 2 prospects I was relatively low on because I didn't highlight rolls quite this specifically. God, me and my typing. Before last year, both hits have receiving yards per team pass attempt over 2, which Worthy has, and a contested target share. And a similar contested target share, which is good, below 13, which Worthy also meets. I'm just basically using those numbers to contextualize what his overall profile looks like. He's not relying on contested catches, which Zach has told me is a bad thing. The go up and get it type stuff, or that's what I equate it to. But that doesn't quite wrap it up with a bow, because frankly, there are 31 other prospects in that cohort, and remember, there are only 2 hits, and that's somewhat concerning. It's not a very popular cohort for an NFL team to draft highly, that high dot and high slot, and there are 6 players who actually meet those thresholds I was just mentioning, and again, only 2 hit. When you're talking about such a low hit rate, I don't know what looks good and where the red flags might be. But if you compare him to the broad group, he looks fantastic, and you compare it to the smaller group, also looks fantastic. So I see no red lights. I just know I have a limited number of ways of comparing him to players that have gone on to be successful. Compared to Flowers and Mooney, he looks better. But again, that's 2 players playing in different teams and different conferences, so it's hard to equate one to the other. If this was last year, even let alone a few years ago, I would have been giving him the KJ Hamler treatment, who's also one of those 6 that passed the test. And I wanted to highlight that in my notes as well. Like there's some downside to it, but I don't see a third profile in this class that I like better. So I'm pretty comfortable putting him 3rd, despite all those caveats. Like I like him a lot.
The fun thing for me, Peter, is when I do my film work and give the grade, then I can cross-reference with what you have seen in the numbers. And the fact that we both have Xavier Worthy up in this range, and again, it's to me, there's a top 2, and then there's a group of about 5, 6. Like the next group is a big kind of muddle where I've got Worthy up at the top of that group, but there's not much that separates Worthy, Brian Thomas, Rome Odunze, Devontae Walker, Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Malachi Corley. Like that group is very strong and has a lot of players that I like. They're different. I mean, there are a lot of different profiles there. Worthy to me is going to be, Bob, to answer your question, you're not going to be wrong grabbing him in the 1st. You may not have to grab him in the 1st.
That's where I was going to go with it next. Like you said, the 107 for a running back, and like that's a range where I'm like, that's where I want Worthy. If I have to trade back, I'll trade back. But like I want to take shots at wide receiver down there, which is silly because you really should. Again, process, guys. If you're a first-time listener and haven't listened to babble about this for years, You should be taking running backs pretty consistently based on their ranks. We're fairly good at it as a community, and running backs do it earlier. They do it better. The value goes up. They're so limited in the NFL for fantasy that you should just value running backs. But this type of class, I'm going to go ahead and take the Batemans. I'll take the KJ Hamlers. I'll take my misses because I just prefer the there are a few wide receivers in this class. I will take that shot on after we get out the top 5, and Bowers is in my top 5 like pretty firmly as well.
And Worthy, to me, like, again, if you look at like all 3 years, he led Texas in receptions. He was driving targets early, often throughout his career. He plays with really great pace and change of speed within route, which is something that I said about Jordan Addison. It's something I've said about some of those smaller receivers who drive separation. Devontae Smith was that way. I think he has speed to take the top off the defense, but he doesn't necessarily have to do that. So he can get over the top. He can make plays downfield. And Dynasty Coach A is in the chat saying Worthy's strength didn't match up with Quinn Ewers. Absolutely. Like, there were so many times when Worthy was open deep and Ewers threw the ball 5 yards behind him and 10 yards, out of bounds, and Worthy just wasn't getting the ball where he needed it to be to catch it in stride. I think that Worthy is really good at finding holes between levels of zones, which is something that I've come to really value, especially with players who get slid into the slot, because oftentimes you'll have coverage on the outside with your X receiver, and the guys who get slid into the slot see some of that junk, where they play the cover 2, Tampa 2, and so they're seeing zone and being able to find holes in zone coverage is a solid piece of a profile that I'm looking for, especially with today's NFL.
You don't do comps. I don't do comps. It's a relatively frustrating exercise, and one player isn't another player. Yeah. But I gotta ask, like, that's the thing. There's no real high ADOT players. Like, I don't have any idea what this guy does in the NFL. That's one of my problems. So, is there something? Do you see what he could do in the NFL? Is there comparison to that type of role, that type of fantasy relevant role? Like, what volume? Was he down the field? Is he close to the line? Is he Cooper Kupp? Not that he is Cooper Kupp, but what does he do?
So again, like, it's a really similar watch to me to Jordan Addison. And so he's a player who can go down the field, can win with speed, but can also win in the intermediate areas. And especially with his ability to beat zone, I think he's going to drive some volume underneath and intermediate because he can win in those areas. He's also really good at reading safeties and beating them. So figuring out what the high safeties are doing. If they're cheating up, he'll beat them deep. If they're giving him cushion, he'll break that route off. The problems that I see, a lot of them stem from him being 6'1", and I've got him listed at 160. He probably comes in a little heavier than that, but he is a burner. He struggles with being manipulated by physical defenders. Sometimes, like when he gets out and is pressed, he struggles with that, although I think you mitigate that by moving him into the slot, putting him in motion. He struggles with clusters of drops, and that's going to be the one you're going to hear from everybody, is that Xavier Worthy drops the ball. Well, he had 3 drops in a bowl game 2 years ago where he was coming back from a broken hand, and he had 3 drops with one hand, and plus drops don't actually matter. So like
that's what I was going to say. I wouldn't even.
And so like that's fine. And the other thing, he has a habit of sometimes trying to split zone coverage on a cross rather than getting an angle and getting a seam. And so he gets passed off between defenders easier instead of, but that's when he's running like kind of a crosser, and he should be running a slant, that sort of thing. But again, those are minor, and I like, again, really enjoyed his film. There were so many times when you were like, oh, and Dynasty Coach A says Worthy's up to 173, and that'd be fantastic if he still runs what what we expect, because he should be a burner. If he's up to 173, I mean, you're in that range of, and I think my write-up talks about, we're looking for things that aren't there. Like a lot of people are going to knock him for being small, but most of the small players that get weeded out by the NFL, it's because they're not talented enough to be where they are. And if you look at the players who are talented enough at that size, the Devontae Smith, the Tank Dell, like that to me is the bucket where Xavier Worthy kind of fits and falls. Like he's a smaller player, but he's a talented smaller player. And so I do see him with the ability to succeed.
Sorry. Yeah, that's where I struggle with him. I absolutely love the profile. It's just you can only profile wide receivers so long until you hit and miss list gets so disappointing. It's relatively small, but my misses where I've missed because I take few shots but take them hard, they hurt so bad. I'm scared to get hurt again, but I love the guy. I tell you what, looking at my ranks, the guy, like I said at the start, the guy that struck me on my wide receiver ranks, I'm like, I thought I liked him, but he comes in at 7th, and that just looks so below the fold. Is Troy Franklin? I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, Franklin is more of a downfield to me winner. He's able to get over the top with speed. He's very good at ball tracking. Is very sound hands, so he's a hands catcher, catches the ball out away from his body, which kind of protects the ball from the defender breaking it up, also keeps it from bouncing off him, double catching, that sort of thing. He's got really good body control where like he can track a ball and adjust to an underthrow or an overthrow, like and make plays, make the quarterback look a little bit better than he is. Also get you some of those plays where some receivers aren't going to make that reception. And also Troy Franklin off the line of scrimmage is so fast. Like he's got such a quick, he's got such a quick release, but there's a but that follows that.
I didn't like that, but
he struggles with contact. So if a player can get up and jam him at the line of scrimmage, he struggles. If a player can keep their hands on him and move him off a route, he's kind of content to be steered by a physical defender. And for my money, Troy Franklin is not a player that is going to add yards after the catch. And again, this is not backed by data, so you may tell me I'm an idiot, but like watching him, he's more of a catch it player than he is a catch it and run player. And so I want that extra. I'm greedy. I want a player who can catch the ball and make something happen after he's got it. And he is often wrapped by that first defender, unable to get away. And so like, again, I like Troy Franklin. It's not a knock at Troy Franklin. It's not, sometimes it sounds like I'm being negative. He's still in that second group of, again, 7 receivers that I think are all talented, do different things. Franklin's profile is not probably one that I will be excited about because I don't think that he necessarily drives a ton of targets because he's more of a downfield player.
It's hard to be a volume getter when you're down.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Not many do. In fact, I guess that's my consistent question this year to you, Zach. It's like again, it's not a comp question. It's what do they do in the NFL? Because if it's just Deshaun Jackson, that's different than Calvin Johnson even. Like the Calvin Johnson, that's the guy who gets volume and is kind of a downfield guy, right? And the relatively few we have left of them that we ever did. And what you're saying reminds me of is like a Mike Evans. I don't know why Mike Evans is bad at yards after catch.
No,
similar result, but different means. That's what I'm asking. Are they not succeeding there for the same reason?
It's a little more. Peter, you're driving me into comps. It's a little more like Michael Gallup, like a little faster Michael Gallup. He's not a Mike Evans. He's not a because Mike Evans is really you throw the ball up to Mike Evans and he goes up and gets it. Like that to me is what Mike Evans is. Mike Evans is what everybody hoped Drake London was. Mike Evans is what T. Higgins is. Mike Evans is what everybody hoped that Mike Williams was going to be. Like Mike Evans's profile is not one that succeeds very often. Like it can succeed, but the majority of players that look like Mike Evans aren't Mike Evans. Like they don't vertically separate the way he does, or they don't have quarterbacks that trust them enough to throw them open. Where like Evans, if you watch Mike Evans play, like he gets open some, but so many times it's all right, we're going to throw the ball up because I know Mike Evans can navigate this and out jump the defender and make a play. And so that's what Mike Evans does.
All right, I am actually trying to do a few things. I shouldn't. It's not that I don't love you still or not paying attention, but I literally just got a note from my computer saying your hard drive's about to blow up because it's got too much stuff, but I don't save anything. So I was like, what is it? And what it is every time we make a video together, it's saving it. And I've got like nearly 400 gigabytes worth of Dynasty content with me and you in it. And I was like, I should probably delete some of that. But then I didn't want to delete it. And anyway, yeah, Franklin's an interesting one. But it's part of this class there's a lot of interesting players. I actually wanted to go to something JC Troller is saying here about Worthy because it relates. I don't have a lot of comparison that I can do with the NFL. Someone like Worthy, again, high slot, high dot, the role just kind of doesn't exist in the NFL as far as I can see. But what I have seen I found a little bit of off time to investigate people who excel in college with that role, who like elevate to a different conference. What I'm noticing is their slot rate drops. They actually drop in slot rate and maintain a higher ADOT when they're successful. And something you're saying is people are saying he's a 9-rack guy. What concerns me is the success I'm seeing in college is that's kind of how you find success from that role when you elevate. If I can equate an elevation in college to an elevate in the NFL. And I don't want him to be a downfield guy. So I can see it from that perspective. I don't want him to maintain his ADOT and drop his slot rate. I'd rather maintain his slot rate and drop his ADOT. To be honest with you, from a fantasy perspective, but that's less likely based on the little bit of research I've been able to do in college. But from what Zach's saying, his game is a little more nuanced than Sammy Watkins, which is what 9-rack guy always makes me think.
Sammy Watkins? No, Sammy Watkins was like the can't miss profile, and then he missed.
Right, yeah. He was number 1 in 2014. You'd think it would have worked out.
He was the guy, but it didn't. So, like, it's this, and was that JC that said that? Yeah. So, that may happen. Like, that's one of the fears with Xavier Worthy, and it's one of the reasons why he gets pushed down. But it's also like he's more than that, at least to me, watching him play. Like, he can make plays around the line of scrimmage. He can add yards after the catch. He does take the top off the defense, but he can do all of these other things. And so there is that risk, but there's also potential that, like, the NFL realizes that he can play because he's been able to play every year that he was at Texas. He's been able to drive targets every year that he was at Texas, and that he continue. So,
God, what's that site they make me use that predicts where players are currently valued at in terms of the NFL draft? I can't remember what it's called. I think that's what Dynasty Coach is talking to, 173. Honestly, if I was an NFL team, I'm definitely looking at Worthy top 3 rounds, like fairly confidently. But, you know, there's a reason I'm not. For some reason, 24 running backs make me think of how good Rashad White was in 23. And then I want them after maybe pick 20, James Robinson, James Conner. Wait, are any 24 running backs named James? That does seem to be the ticket. Now, someone asked me roughly about this, or relative to this, in a DM today, which is, what running backs are you targeting? And the theme that me and Zach came up with, and still when I compare my ranks to ADP, seems to be the true. I want great running backs, guys that have been great for several years, okay? And you already know the names: Austin Eckler, CMC, all of them, Alvin Kamara, even, or somewhat to some people disappointing running backs from yesterday's class. That's a theme. You can have your own rankings order, but those are the guys I'm trying to send offers on. I've tried to trade for Saquon Barkley in every league so far and succeeded nowhere. So ADP is a lie, as we know. But yeah, that's kind of who I'm looking for. James Robinson and Connor and those kinds are interesting. I know that's not what you're asking about, but they running backs like that even have more interest for me right now. Yeah. Who's I gonna go to? Yeah. Someone asked. No, I was gonna. There it is. Who are your favorite and least favorite rookie superflex picks in each round and each position? I actually haven't come to grid it out where I want to select players yet. I'm not that confident that deep in my ranks yet. I can tell you I got a top 5 that I'm pretty set on in superflex, and that's the 2 top quarterbacks, which I know there's a lot of conversation for it right now, but it's still Caleb and Drake for me, although I do have to go back and look at some of the stuff that people are saying about this guy is actually the best quarterback, but I'm pretty sure that's just pre-draft noise, but I'm going to check it out. And then there's Harrison and Neighbors, and then there's Brock Bowers. And in some order, outside of some radical QB evaluation changes, those top 5 are pretty set. And I want all the top 5 picks because of it in Superflex. I feel real confident about that 5. After that point, there's a few wide receivers I'm interested in. We're probably going to have to take shots at some of these running backs, and it's highly a trade up or trade out kind of an era. Unless Worthy gets like really good draft capital and everyone starts liking him, then I'm going to be trading in to try and get him there. As it is, I think I'm going to be able to scoop him up less than that, but we'll see. And I have no confidence outside of that. So to answer the question as best I can right now, Neighbors is my favorite pick because he can get him below Harrison. And I'm as confident that he's going to hit. And I don't have as much uncertainty with a role in the NFL. Zach are both highlighted in different ways. Like, I think that role hits more often, even though it might not have the ceiling of Harrison's ultimate ceiling. I still think it has a really nice ceiling on it. And I think Bowers also enters that conversation. It's starting to ramp up now, especially with Kelsey coming to the end of his career. But there's always a chance people underrate that value arc of tight end, especially if he hits Sam Laporta-esque, but better. And my least favorite right now, I hate the running back conversation at the top. Like, if we're going to have to value Braylon Allen as like a top 8 pick, as according to DLF, we're going to have to. I hate that. And like Zach said about Brooks, Brooks is one of the more interesting profiles I've come across. But if I have to draft him now and wait till 25 to see him play, that's going to suck. That's not a play I want to make. So I kind of hate the top of the running backs, but I like the middle tier of the running backs. That's about as close as I can come to answering it. But when I grid it out, I have better answers. But Zach, do you have a favorite, least favorite type of players in this class?
Well, so, obviously you mentioned Xavier Worthy. I think he probably falls to late first, early second. When you start looking at the second round, we already talked Blake Corum. Brooks is probably going to be a fun one down there. Ladd McConkey is probably going to be a back end of the second. When you get into the third round, I think Malachi Corley and Tez Walker, even though like I have them up in that tier of wide receivers that I really like, I think they're going to be pretty close to the third. And Ray Davis, like you talked about Ray Davis right now, he may get pumped up. All of this kind of depends on draft capital and because that's going to be the most, and we harp on this all the time, but the most predictive thing, the most important piece of this puzzle is draft capital, because draft capital is the NFL saying, this is what we think about these players. And it's individual teams saying, we are going to attach this, not only pick value, but there is a dollar value assigned to those picks. And so the higher the pick, the more invested the teams are in these players, which means the more invested they are in having the players succeed, which means the more chances they are going to have to succeed. So a lot of this is draft capital dependent. And then like once you get down into like the deeper rounds, so like fourth round, if you go fifth round, like you're looking at somebody like a Brendan Rice, who again he's kind of a bully. He's not like a true separator, but he's also been very good and happens to be Jerry Rice's kid. And so if I can take a shot on a player that I think is pretty good, but also has that lineage, he's going to get multiple shots. Like the NFL has that little kernel of nepotism in their head. A player like Dylan Lobb, who came out of or is coming out of New Hampshire, is a very good pass catcher and could end up working into a role where he's a pass catcher, but then also has a plus in case of an injury. He's a kind of a late round flyer. Another one of the nepotism babies, Frank Gore Jr., is a little undersized, but has a lot of the tools to be able to win at the next level. So those are some later round players, and I've heard a lot of people be in on Malik Washington too, as a later round receiver. He's fine to me. He's a in route paper tiger, but holy cow, is he a lion once he's got the ball. And so that's an interesting kind of juxtaposition. If a team drafts him and runs him in kind of like the Miami scheme where you're putting players in motion a lot, getting them free releases, somebody like Malik Washington can be really successful too.
I'm looking for players that I like that aren't too high. Like I thought Brian Thomas might not be spoken about much, but he's like fourth according to DLF. So I'm like, okay, I know people know about him. I don't even know what people know, if you know what I mean, or what I think that doesn't. I think Odunze being fifth might strike some, but like I like the profile just fine. He's third according to DLF. Yeah, no, I don't know enough about what I think to think about what other people think yet. Where are we going? James White, James Conner. Okay, I think I read that one. Sorry, I am losing myself. Least favorite. Oh, Keon Coleman sucks. I mean, the person might not, and he might find a role in the NFL, but I am not. No. I've got him in the same tier as Malik Washington, put it that way. No. Wait. No, I've got him high.
I got him.
I got him in the same tier.
I've got him one below. Like I got Malik Washington at 13 right now, out of the 17 receivers that I've watched.
I've got Malik Washington at 17. Like I haven't made notes on him yet, so that might change. But like, there's just a type of prospect that's underproductive at a high efficiency role. I'm also always going to be like, nope, not taking that bet. Like you can be questionable or good with a high efficiency role, but if you're not a significant part of your team's offense with that high efficiency role, I'm like, someone else can take this. This is the next year. Deshaun Jackson bet. So him, Adonai Mitchell. I'm not saying that right. Adonai. Thank you. Adonai Mitchell. Even Xavier Leggett. I'm like sixth tier. I'll think about it again later, but I don't like that kind of thing. And I've just pushed them all down there. Thrash, I like. I got some more cold water through on me. And last time I talked about Thrash by Zach, I think, or is he the guy I asked you to look at?
You asked me to watch him, and I did, but I don't have a write up on him yet.
Oh.
So
I can tell you guys what I've written about him so far, and I've got to go back and do my second look. But he's high up low slot player, like below 11%. This is not a guy who spent too much time in the slot, but not as little as someone like DK Metcalf. 30% above average in receiving yards per team pass attempt in that role. The cohort comes up with people like Antonio Golden Gandy, who I liked way more than I should have, but also William Fuller, who definitely showed some NFL potential while he was in the league. And in the middle there, you've got someone like Romeo Doubs and Gabe Davis. So I don't know what to think. It's a wide range of outcomes in that particular cohort. With a lot of productive misses, which is what concerns me and why I'm often to devalue that tier of players or that type of player. But he's an interesting, relatively productive prospect of the type who's overly dependent on contested catches more typically. He's got the average is like 16%, which is about right for that kind of role. Kelvin Harmon and Antonio Gundy were both above that mark, closer to 20%, which is where you get a little concerned about it. But yeah, I think maybe he's one of the people with that role that I like, but I'm really looking for outside opinions on that. Again, there's a lot of productive players with that role that are really hard to pierce out where the hits and misses are, which is kind of why I'm trying to run into the Zach Reed filter here. But he don't care. He's like, nah, I'm not gonna look.
No, I watched Thrash. I just haven't written him up yet. Like, I think he's really savvy off press at the line of scrimmage, which is something that's nice as a player who's going to play out wide quite a bit of the time. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. I don't think he's very dynamic post catch, which again, this is something that I like. I like those yards after catch players. I like the guys who drive high target, high volume, and then add yards after the catch. He's got really good sync and sudden change of direction, which again, that speaks to being able to get open. He's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts player, where he's not gonna beat you over the top. He's not gonna add a whole bunch of yards after the catch, but he can catch like 6, 7, 8 curls in a row, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so he's an interesting player that way. But he can get over the top. Like, he's fast enough to get over the top, but he's not good at the catch point. So it's this weird, like, it's the peace symbol button on the helmet next to the Born to Kill. It's the duality of man. Like, how do you have a deep threat who is not a catch point player? Because once you get to a deep ball, you usually have to win at the catch point. So it's kind of an interesting thing. He sometimes struggles against man coverage, getting open deep, like I said, and he will drop a bunch of balls. He will body catch a lot, but like not a bad player. I don't think he's going to be in that first set of 7 that are behind Neighbors and Marvin Harrison, but he's not a bad player, and like he could end up being a useful NFL player.
All right, I didn't like that. It's like, I don't want to offend you, Pete. So
it's not like I'm not super excited about him. Like, he's nice, but he's not.
I need to know these hard truths, Zach.
Peter. It's like the high school romance. I like him, but I don't like him. Like,
yeah,
I wave to him in the hall, but I'm not holding his hand.
Alan Davis, Jalen Polk, I have actually taken a look at. He's in that same group with Worthy, in that he's in this really weird role that I don't have a comparisons for, just to give you a heads up. High slot, high ADOT, what the hell do I do with that? He's got in that group with everyone from who's in that group? Hakeem Butler, Donald Mooney, Zay Flowers, the 2 hits right at the end most recently. So maybe it's something that's becoming more common. It's something I'm kind of suggesting there. It could just be randomly these 2 players relatively recently worked out. And what I've got written down on Polk, outside of all those notes about the positional group, he's over 30%. His slot rate escalated in his final 2 years, which is interesting to me, the way it changes, that variability in that role. I don't mind seeing that. I like seeing a player who's evolved, and also a player that's played different roles, especially when they're in this weird group, and they're definitely not going to be able to maintain that in the NFL. And I'm just basing their bucket off their average, not their individual seasons. So I often dig through the seasons to see if their regular play in one year to the other was actually much more typically bucketed, and there's a path to the NFL. And that last year is when his last 2 years is when his slot rate expanded, but his ADOT stayed relatively high. But when you look at that cohort, I don't know what's good, what's bad cohort. His yards per route run is kind of mediocre. His receiving yard team pass attempt is borderline below expected. And he wasn't earning targets at a high rate. He's got 29 routes per game in his final 2 seasons, but he's not earning a lot of targets per routes that he run. Again, it's not number go green. It doesn't like hit a high targets per route run. He'd be great. It's just notable that he's on the field running a lot of routes, which I'd normally like to see, but he wasn't particularly earning targets on them. And in that role, that probably has something to say, but I don't know because I have so few to compare it to. And what I ended up saying is my so far conclusion is that in a cohort with Akeem Butler at one end, terrible. I can't tell you how terrible that prospect profile was, despite how some people like him, and Mooney and Zay Flowers on the other. He's somewhere in the middle. But when you've only got 2 successes and all these productive players lining that didn't work out, I actually don't know what's good and what's bad. And so that's somewhat of a suspect final note right now. But that's what I've got on Polk. He's in this really weird group. I really have to dig through that year-to-year stuff a little bit more and look at the context. I think it's just if I'm going to take bets on that high slot, high end, it's going to be a worthy. That's my Achilles heel. Just show me a guy who is over 2 yards for receiving yards per team pass attempt, and I'll fall in love. That's what I've done with Worthy. Whereas Polk's doing that role and is substantially below average. He's not a huge relative to the team's offense, part of that offense, and I'm like, I'll let someone else hit it unless Zach tells me no, because he really did like Mooney at the time, and I was on him. Then maybe I'll take a second look. But so far, Zach has said nothing on him. He's just sitting there in silence, like he doesn't even care what we.
I'm waiting, Peter. I'm waiting for the numbers to wash over me. But I think
I don't stop talking. You just gotta go.
A lot of people will point out that Jalen McMillan was the leader on that team in 2022. Suffered an injury this past year, and so Jalen Polk's role changed. McMillan may actually be McMillan may actually have been at least better than Polk, and some accounts better than Odunze. Again, I haven't watched enough Jalen McMillan to really give you the goods on him, but I can tell you what I think of Jalen Polk. I think Polk does a good job at the stem of his route. He's real sudden with his change of directions, can create space that way. It's one of those where you are trying to attack a foot of the defender and get a plant so you can get a commit, and then you can make that quick cut the other way. He does a really good job with that. He's very adept at working the sideline of zones at the second level. So he'll get around behind the first zone defender, but in front of the second level of the zone and just kind of sit there. And so that's a really nice throwing window for his quarterback. He's very strong at the catch point. He's 6'2", 190. So he's a bigger receiver. Again, very strong at the catch point. He makes plays in traffic. He tracks deep throws really well and will use double moves to get deep, which is something that not all of these wide receivers do. It kind of stems from the ability to have a little bit of a choice route where he's got the ability to run a curl or a slant, but then based on coverage, he can give it a go route or another move. The things that I don't like, again, struggles with clusters of concentration drops. He does struggle to separate intermediately versus man. So in that middle area, so he's real good deep, he's real good short, but in that 10 to 17 yard range, it's a little dicey. I think occasionally he's tackled post catch way too early. You'd like to see him add a little more for yards after the catch. And in the screen game, he's not dynamic, and they feed him screens, and he's 3 yards and down. And it's man, I want to see him have a little more wiggle, be able to get away and go. And so that's Jalen Polk. He's okay, but I don't think he's nearly the player that people think he is, because he got thrust into a role on a team that went to the national championship. So again, a high-powered offense, a deep threat offense, and with the injury to McMillan, it's, to me, skews it just a little bit.
Solid. There's people pushing Coleman into the first round. I read this ahead of time, just so you know, I could see it there, and I was like, what am I going to say? And I looked at the names because I do not remember things. I can't remember if it was Cedric Tillman or Jalen Hyatt that was getting first round buzz a little bit. And I'll say a
Hyatt.
similar thing. Yeah, I'll say a similar thing I said last year. Like, I could see it. I'm not scouting effective NFL players. Like, it's very difficult to be a downfield threat in the NFL level. You're talking about like 1% human athletes, and the corners in the NFL are insanely talented, as they all are. So I'm not going to tell you he can't deserve that draft capital. And the NFL used to, although they didn't last year. I was surprised when Hyatt didn't actually pay off on that bet. Usually those high A guys who get that buzz, people take a shot just in the hope they can rake in all that quick, easy yardage. Not easy yardage, but a quick downfield yardage. And they didn't. I'm not going to say that isn't viable or isn't a good decision for the NFL, but you can miss me with it. Yeah, I don't want it on my fantasy team. Guys who excel in fantasy that way, very few and far between, as we're talking about with a lot of these prospects. And I admit, if Coleman's it, that's fine. He'll be on someone else's team though, especially at that value.
Yeah, and for me, Keon Coleman is the player that everyone wants to dream on.
Yeah,
Keon
right.
Coleman
I mean, if it works,
like,
wow.
6'4", athletic. Look, he returns kicks. He returns punts, just like N'Keal Harry did. Run that back. Go check that out.
Hey.
Yeah, and it's look. He's athletic enough to be a return man. He's excellent in contested catch and high point situations. He's very smart when a play breaks down. Like, he does the best job in the class of working back to a quarterback who is in trouble and needs a safety valve. He does a pretty good job playing through contact. The problem is he's very slow and choppy at the line of scrimmage, and he's going to have to work from the outside. He's going to have to split out wide. So he is going to see like press coverage. He's going to see man coverage. He's going to see guys get up and get in his grill, and he's not very good off the line of scrimmage. He has trouble separating versus man coverage outside of vertical separation. So, like, he can go up and get it. He can out jump people. And I tweeted out, it was probably a month ago now, but there was one play, and everybody's going to post that play, where they threw the ball up to him in the middle. He was between two defenders. He went up and caught it with one hand and brought it into his body, made that play. And I said, look, it's perfect. The Jets can draft him. He's absolutely what Zach Wilson needs, because Zach Wilson throws the ball 6 feet over everybody's head. Keon Coleman can jump up and catch the ball 6 feet over his head. It's a perfect marriage, but it's not a profile that I am looking for. He also misreads cushion an awful lot and will like misuse double moves. So if a player is giving him cushion, he'll run a double move and like not gain anything by doing that. Usually double moves are effective when a player is playing up close to you. And so you make that move and they bite on the first one and then you go. And he also drifts against zone coverage and is content to sit with a defender and rely on his physicality. So again, to me, even as athletic as Keon Coleman is, as many of the flashes as people are seeing on his highlight film, he's really a big vertical separator. Like, again, N'Keal Harry, Johnston from last, but like that, like that's the profile to me. And it's, people are going to get excited about it because everyone's looking for Calvin. You know, they're looking for DK. They're looking for the white whale. They want that X receiver. I just, it's not a profile I want to chase.
The flag to me, well, one of them. I spoke at a church, I guess. He's not a high ADOT guy. He's a low ADOT guy. His ADOT is under 13, but if you have a ADOT under 13, but a slot rate under 60%, that's relatively low to that ADOT, if that makes sense. So he turns out to be a low slot and low ADOT. Just fun. It's a fun group. It's not a fun group at all. It's a group that nightmares are made of. And just to read this so I can throw some numbers to pretend there's any actual work going on here. Nah, bruh. Nah. Work. Investigative,
I
mature
like
work
it.
going on
That
here.
was good.
Not even Chase Claypool had to rely on 26% contested catches. He was only 20%. He's at 88% above the ADOT slot bucket. His ADOT hovers around 12, even in his best points per game year, while his average slot rate is below 20%. Best points per game was 25% over expected, fueled through touchdowns. He's below average in terms of volume, receiving yards per team pass attempt for his career. His most recent comp is probably Cedric Tillman, not higher, sorry. Because Marvin Mims had more slot time, over 40% instead of below 20%. Could certainly be a role player in the NFL. I like him, but don't like him. In other words, like Zach said, but he looks fairly below average for success even in the successful group of that nightmare cohort with Chase Claypool. He was getting the targets and routes, but not contributing as much in terms of God, I can't spell shit, can I? Of the overall team yards relative to the size of the offense. That's literally what receiving yards team pass attempt is. Apparently, I just felt like using more words than I needed to. That could be slightly exaggerated by his ADOT, just over a 1. That must be 11, 12. Tillman's ADOT was over 15, for example. But overall, adjustments would make him look even more like an average prospect at best compared to historical profiles that have succeeded. So, yeah, I hate him. If he succeeds, it'll be on someone else's team. I want the player to do well. Again, that's always the underlining. Like I'm talking about the fantasy asset. It doesn't compare well, but there's a player, sure. Gentlemen, none here, but I appreciate you, Hans. Maybe we can gaslight everyone into thinking we are. That's cool. If you're all willing, I'd be curious if you have any thoughts on wide receiver Roy Flournoy. It's not even a weird name. I just suck at names. Flournoy. As a prospect, small guy, looked like pretty solid at the Senior Bowl. Yeah, I'll give it a go if I can. Although it might crash the stream if I have to open up my main database. I'm not sure I have him in this mini one here.
I have not.
I don't. He didn't play CFB, so I'm not going to have him. No. Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't watched him yet, Herms, but I will write him down and put him on my list of players to watch. And so if we get to the catch-all show on the Hoot, because he's not going to be a top 12 guy. If we get to the catch-all show with wide receivers on the Hootenanny, that will be a player, Ryan Flournoy, that I will watch for you.
I will look him up, but I'm not going to be able to do much with it. I'll tell you that. Fortunately, I can tell you. Sorry, Zach. I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, you're fine.
Senior Bowl standouts. Last year it was Puka Nacua. 2022 it was Christian Watson. The year before that, Michael Carter, Josh Palmer, Mac Jones. Year before that, Antonio Gibson and Herbert both caught enough buzz that even I heard about it. That's what this list is. Year before that, it was Hunter Renfrow, Terry McLaurin, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, unfortunately, and Deebo Samuels. It's a better list as I've been compiling it than I remember. So it's not terrible to be good at the Senior Bowl. That's probably the best data point I've got for you. But yeah, I'll look as best I can. Anthony, Marshawn Lloyd is the next running back in the mix too. Lloyd in the RB mix too. Have I looked at that fella?
Oh, Marshawn Lloyd is
yet. No.
So Marshawn Lloyd may be the best runner in the class.
Oh.
He's not the best running back, but in terms of a runner, I really like Marshawn Lloyd. He is 5'9", 217, so again, compact. So he's got a little bit of bulk, but he's also a smaller player. When Lloyd has an opening, he has tremendous burst. He gets there quickly. Very good patience and vision inside. I love his feet in traffic. J. Mike likes to use the phrase he can pick through the trash. So if there are a lot of bodies on the ground in the lane that he's supposed to be running through, he can get there. He can get through. He doesn't need things clean. and he does really well getting small through the initial hole. So he's a crease runner. That was one of the things that really stood out about a player like Kareem Hunt. And so that's, again, those are the real positive things. I think while Lloyd's initial vision is really good, his secondary vision is a little bit lacking. But he's not a guy who uses angles to get away from defenders, and so he's not going to add 20 yards onto a 10-yard run. He's going to get to 10 and then get what he gets. He's not very good at all in pass protection, which again doesn't matter, but it also matters because he's probably not going to be on the field on passing plays. He fights with the ball when he's trying to be a receiver. I've seen a couple of people say that they think he's an adequate receiver. I don't think he is. I think he fights with it an awful lot. Yeah, it's and he also
punch it into a catch.
Yeah, and he's not necessarily like not a quick twitch guy. So like if a defender gets through the line of scrimmage, he doesn't have that creativity to get away very, but that's like the David Montgomery thing. Like that was always David Montgomery. It would drive people nuts because he would make like 6 moves behind the line of scrimmage because Iowa State's line was so bad. And I'm like, he's making 5 guys miss for a 1-yard loss. Marshawn Lloyd is the opposite, where he's like, I'm just going to take the 1-yard loss because I can't make you miss. But again, a really fun runner. He's going to probably be a later round pick in Dynasty in rookie drafts, but like a fun player.
I've written them down to look at. I'm looking at some mock drafts. Jacob Cowing's predicted 68th overall according to CBS. Like, I hate all these nasty ass data grinders that let everyone know about everyone. I mean, I'm meant to know about someone that low down. I think I'm 68th overall. Dynasty coach, yeah, and for real, yeah. That seems on the nose. We have George Pickens at home, Coleman. Yeah, George Pickens better, but yeah. I want to draft Luke McCaffrey. Yeah, right. I think we should draft all the legacies just for the sake of it. Rice, you've got Frank Gore Jr. I don't know if it's actually Frank Gore Jr., but that'd be cool. Like,
it is. No, it is. It's Frank Gore. Frank Gore Jr.
They earned it.
This class, I've never felt as old as I have watching this class come out with Jerry Rice's kid, Frank Gore Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr., Luke McCaffrey. There's a defensive player who, like, there are just so many legacy players in this. It is absolutely wild. I'm old, Peter. I am old.
I will say someone asked, so I looked up Luke McCaffrey. I don't have him noted down here, but yeah, no offense to his mother or his brother. Senior Bowl. Please don't hurt me, but he looked like a genuinely terrible prospect. But you know what? Whatever. Yeah. Tell me a reason why it's okay. It's okay because Mr. McCaffrey earned that for Luke. Like, let's say we owe him that. I mean, come on.
His uncle lives town over.
Yeah, there you go.
That was always when I was in junior high. It was the very first girl I ever went on a date with. Her sister actually married Ed McCaffrey's brother, and so like that was like the coolest. Go. Yeah. So there. I'm Kevin Bacon in this scenario.
You're basically family.
That's pretty much it. We didn't.
You can connect everyone to Zach Reed eventually.
Yeah, we didn't make it, but no, we went and saw The Cutting Edge together. It was nice.
There you go.
Toe pick.
For the record, he's the only guy I spoke to personally. Flournoy is a great dude, and I think he's worth exploring. It's good to know. Thank you. Really held his own in 1v1 drills against DBs as someone who comes from the F. Yeah, that's notable. He is playing against probably his toughest competition. If he's standing out, that's not nothing.
And again, this is somebody where the combine and getting some of those measurables. If he ends up at the combine, if he ends up doing the drills, the athleticism from the drills, that's where that matters to me. As a guy coming from, an FCS school and is trying to play at the NFL level, you kind of have to have the requisite athleticism.
I tell you what, I keep batting around that idea. Like there are 2 black marks for me, not red, not green, just marks on Rondell Moore's profile. And one was really only had 1 year to profile. It was his 18th year, which is going to overly bias his results, and it was really good. I don't like not having multiple years for that reason. And the other was he was such an athlete. I'm like, getting on the field at 18 is good. Getting on the field at 18 because you're an incredible athlete and doing well because you're an incredible athlete is more questionable than not. And it's a reverse, like you say, with FCS players. Like if you do well at the FCS, that's one thing. But if you play against CFB competition and your athleticism, that's where it might have some value, if you know what I mean. Not put it in a model value, but explanative value that he wasn't succeeding just because of his athleticism. And if you're on the FCS and you're succeeding well and you're actually an athlete on an NFL level, that's probably a more positive indicator that you weren't productive at the FCS because it was the FCS, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
And so I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I like. People are like, what do you think about the combine? And I was like, I think it matters for like 5 players that I'm interested in. Like it was the and that like that to me is kind of how I use it. This is the James Robinson corollary. Like I watched James Robinson. I like James Robinson on film. Okay, now I need to see him at the combine to make sure he's an NFL level player before this film is real. You know what I mean? Like, because again, like you can, if you're playing at Division II, you're playing at Division III, you're playing, and no offense, or you're playing FCS, like no offense to those schools. Having dominated a conference at Division III level and knowing that I am nowhere near a Major League Baseball player, like gives me a little bit of pause when you see somebody dominate at a lower level. It was Cody Schrader did that, where like he led Division II. And if we just had Cody Schrader's Truman State stats, where like he had 300 carries and 2,000 yards and 25 touchdowns at Truman State. Oh, okay. What does the combine look like? But then you see him go to Missouri and have 276 carries and 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns. So then you're like, oh, okay. Well, he's doing it at Missouri. He did it at Truman State. I'm a lot more confident in that profile than if it had just been Truman State and then he gets to the combine and doesn't do anything. Does that track?
What I would think of is when the majority of stuff I put out that was interesting to anyone at all was the graphs of age-adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, basically. It was a graph with like players, and it showed the rough correlation between success in the NFL and this one metric. I'd always get asked about this one orange dot that was just, you basically had to scroll up to see it, just standing by itself. Like, is that some kind of smudge on the screen? Because it was just so outlandish to everyone else. But it was Demaryius Thomas because he played for Georgia Tech. And then you look into him and you find not only is he good, obviously, but he's also this phenomenal size-adjusted athlete, like this huge guy who is an athlete. And you're like, so, okay, he's good in Georgia Tech, which is one thing, but then he's also this mega size and mega athlete. Like, that's why he's this weird outlier in terms of production. He kind of sets a bar. Like, if you're playing down there, you don't just have to be good, you also have to have, like Zach says, be able to adjust the NFL level of athleticism. That's hard to know unless you're Demaryius Thomas. And then if you're both, you look like a weird. It's Aaron Jones does the same thing on a similar scale. It's just this weird guy.
Even Cooper Kupp, like even Cooper Kupp with his production at a lower level, but then seeing him like I remember watching the combine with Cooper Kupp, watching him do the 3-cone, and then watching him do the gauntlet and be the best receiver at the gauntlet, like not even a question. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, these stats track. This film that I watched tracked. I'm in. And so it's that kind of a similar thing where, like, you know, it's hard to because you can't compare the FCS and the NC, the BCS. Like, you
literally
can't compare them.
There's
They're
no
two different
consistent
things, yeah.
adjustment you can make. It's just that's why I don't put them in the database. It's not because I don't want to see it. Like, I thought about doing a separate one. It's one, because you have to hand type a lot of it, which I used to do, but not anymore. And two, because putting them next to each other kind of leads to this idea that they're comparable. It's like one's playing football and the other one's playing fucking soccer. You know, it's like not really. But
then you go back and look at, like, the greatest receiver of all time played at Mississippi Valley State. Like, it's not.
That is what I love about those lower teams, because like great players are all over the place, and some of them don't succeed because the NFL leads on these biases as well. I mean, you have to make a group and make a pick somewhere, and so FCS, get out of here. It's an easy cut. Like, if you're doing resumes, it's easy to throw away the one that's got coffee stains on it. But that might just be the best guy. But yeah, sorry.
No, that's it. Like, it's worth going back and looking, but also, like, he would, and I haven't look. I'll have to look up Flournoy, but like, you have to kind of dominate at that level and also be athletic enough to play at the next level, those are sometimes two different things. But yes, to answer the whole thing, Herms, is we're cheering for him. We're excited about him. It's cool that you got to speak to him. Cool. And I will look at his film, because why not?
True thumb nude. True Dynasty League champions like and subscribe to the Dynasty Grind #facts. I appreciate that. Thumb nude. All right, we're out of questions, but we're still relatively early, and I have plenty. Let's see. Outside of cowing, I think we talked about Corley, right?
I mentioned him in passing. Corley. I can talk about Corley.
I like him relative to where speaking of players coming from relatively low prospect, like, someone asked me to add him, and I did, and I looked at him, and I thought I wasn't going to like him too much because of where he's from. His cursor. But I still, I've ran through how many players at this point? 23, which is about a third of this class. This year is heavy in wide receiver prospects. But he's still ranking in the top 12, which I think, for me, I find that fairly impressive considering where he's coming from. He's a low ADOT, high slot player according to my buckets, and like below 7 ADOT and 80% slot. So it's heavily in that direction. 4-year players, only 3 that really register for my volume thresholds. It's in the Cursor Conference of Western Kentucky. Go Kentucky.
How about those Hilltoppers, baby? Bailey Zappi.
I've got a copy and paste here because I make the same point every time. We haven't seen a Cursor prospect hit even in the top 36 since 2012. And that was Cole Beasley, so we might want to ignore it anyway. But there are a couple of those who elevated into a higher conference who have, at least, and had some significance. Cameron Meredith comes to mind, as does Kenny Golladay. Now, real talk, the last time I allowed myself to even have deep interest in a rookie drafted from the Cursor Conference, it was Jaden Darden. Yeah, who you don't even remember, let's face it. And that's partly because he secured 4th-round draft capital. The less mainstream the conference gets, the less comparable the players are, as we were just talking about statistically, to our history of prospects. Not because all their numbers are astronomical. That's not the way it works. Because that would be a simple adjustment. And there's no consistent adjustment you can make to make lower conferences compare. You just can't compare them very well. But because based on hits at least, but because their numbers are incomparable, for example, Corley is a solid prospect with receiving yards per team pass spent just above, like 6% above the average for his role. And his overall model score is also below average in yards per route run. You don't see higher numbers, you just see numbers that don't really guide us to whether they did well or not, because we have, again, lack of comparables to actually make the decision. Cursor is about as deep as I look anymore, and about the only comparison I can come up with, God, typing, is to look at the other Cursor players. Corley is a decent prospect with little expectation of draft capital, but with his yards per route run over 2.6, and his receiving yards per team pass attempt above the age-adjusted curve, which again is relatively positive, despite the curve circumference, because there's no easy, consistent adjustment. It's not like you can just +2 or -3. His QB ratings are solid as well, and I find that interesting that deep. If you're helping out the quarterback when you're playing out curve, I mean, you should be if you're actually going to be good when you elevate, or if you can elevate. And we have no idea how he'd perform against better competition, or if the future will allow him a semi-potential path to prove himself in an inbreeding league with unicorn thinking. Or unicorn? Unironical? I've got it. That's not the right word. It's a terrible league with stupid people running it. That's what I'm trying to say. Something like that. But they do tend to think words like pedigree matter as if people are horses, which is just stupid. But he is dynamic after the catch relative to where he was playing, with 8.1 yards after catch per reception, which is well above the average. And I find that interesting because that's just you and the defenders almost. And I think you should have to be doing something impressive on a per touch basis at a lower conference, especially in that particular role where all your yards have to come after the catch almost. And he's a huge volume, or he had a huge relative volume to the team offense. So it's a huge part of that team relative to how much they were passing the ball. It's a relatively positive profile. Sorry, that's a big one, but the deeper you go, the more I feel compelled to write more. I liked him. I think he's playing close to the line of scrimmage and heavy slot player, so there's relatively few paths to fantasy relevance anyway, but they do exist, and I love volume. And while it's impossible to compare them, like I was just been saying for 5 minutes, to other prospects really very accurately, the few places where I think you can start to think, is this positive or is this conference without the combine, like Zach was just talking about, he seems to have that. But yeah, we'll wait to the combine. We'll wait to see what he looks like against other players of the type of caliber he's actually going to meet in the NFL. But I think it's fairly interesting. Say stuff that's better.
Well, so the interesting thing to me, or one of the interesting things to me about Malachi Corley, and you talked about him playing in a lower conference, and you talked about him not playing high competition. The beginning of this past year, they played. Yeah, well, so the beginning of this past year, Western Kentucky played Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State beat Western Kentucky 63-10. Absolutely blew them out. You ready for this? Malachi Corley, 8 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown in a 63-10 loss. Like, he was their entire offense. He went out, played against Ohio State, and caught
that's interesting.
Caught his touchdown in the second quarter. So the game was not out of hand yet. It was not like it was.
It's not garbage time, is what you're saying.
So he came out, played against Ohio State's starters, was very successful against Ohio State. And again, that's not the end all be all, and it's a small sample, but to come out and produce in a game where you got your ass handed to you against one of the best programs in the country. I mean, they're the number 6 team in the country. Like they have a program where they are just rolling teams, and Corley produced. And for my money, Corley's 5'11", 200. So he's built a little bit like a running back, which tracks a little bit. He is awesome post catch. So to me, he's got very good hands. He's a hands catcher, keeps the ball away from his body. You like to see that. He transitions very quickly from the catch to a runner, which bodes well for those yards after catch, which he does exceptionally well. He is an excellent runner. So once he's got the ball, he has both speed and the ability to break tackles, even a little contact balance, which is fun for a wide receiver. He is really adept on the sideline, which for a smaller wide receiver is not something you necessarily expect, but like he'll make back shoulder adjustments on the sideline as a 5'11", 200-pound receiver. He does struggle against physical defenders playing man because he, again, is a little bit smaller and is not a great technician. He's not a late separator at all. So if a defender maintains contact or a defender plays in his hip pocket, he's not going to be able to go up and create vertical separation. He's not creating that extra burst separation at the end of a route. And he also occasionally will flatten out the stem of his route, which allows that defender to cover him. But by and large, like I really like what Malachi Corley put on tape. I really like a lot of what he does. He's going to be a slot guy. He's going to be a yards after the catch guy. He's going to be a volume guy. But he also, like, again, like plays like a running back once he's got the ball, which gives him a little bit more versatility in an offense to be able to like scheme him a slant and let him run, get him on a screen and let him make a play. So he's not just a one-dimensional type player, which again, he is that. I think he's my wide receiver 9. He's the bottom of that tier of 7 guys for me that are behind Neighbors and Harrison.
I did not expect you to like him. I'm really happy to hear that, and really, really mad that you have him higher ranked than I do. Like that upsets me quite badly. I've got him in this tier 4 where I like these guys, but I'm trying to be realistic. Maybe I should stop trying to be realistic.
Well, I just go based on what, like, again, I do the numbers and the numbers come out where they come out, and like sometimes I can't. Yeah. Like a couple of years ago, well, the receiver that went to Green Bay that is the deep threat, whose name escapes me right now.
MVS?
No. More recent. Just a deep threat, was great with Rodgers. We had concerns with Love, but he was hurt all last year. So,
Christian Watson.
Yeah, Watson. So, like Watson rated highly in that class for me. But it was because he did 3 things really well that skewed his overall number. Right. And so like sometimes I can't, like the numbers are just what they are. But
it's weird that the tape guys won't say the numbers are what they are. And I'm like, oh no, I think there's a flexibility. What if we just apply our eyes?
There aren't like, but like again, what I think about what a player does is, this is me sitting there, and it's I try to be as objective as possible in a subjective process. So like if a guy grades out highly at these things, that is what it is. I'm not going to rank. I'm not going to adjust his rank down because I'm like, I don't like this guy. I just will give you the caveat of this is not a type of player that I like. Malachi Corley is a type of player that I like. I like those guys who drive high volume. They play in the slot. They have high percentage throws thrown to them, but can add yards after the catch. I love all of that.
Do you like him more or less than Ricky Parcell?
Haven't
watched where he played.
I have not watched Pearsall yet.
All right. I'm moving Corley up somehow. It's happening.
There are like 6 wide receivers right now that I need to watch that, and I've already watched 17 wide receivers, which is too many. But like I still need
too big.
Yeah, like I still need to watch Roman Wilson. I still need to watch Jalen McMillan. I still need to watch Pearsall. Now I got what was it? Flournoy that for Flournoy. Like I got so many guys I need to watch.
Kid Coop asks, hey, by the way, which inbox offer would you take for the 104? Flowers plus the 212, or the 108, the 208, and the 402? I would keep the 104.
Yeah.
That's my answer
Like
in both instances.
Flowers is the closer. I
Flowers,
would rather have Flowers
yeah.
and the 212 than I would the 108, 208, and 402. I would rather have the 104 than any of them. So the 104, and we're assuming
This year.
Superflex. Yeah, 12-team Superflex. So you've got Caleb Williams, you've got Drake May. There's probably Jaden Daniels. Okay, so there's 3 quarterbacks. You're not necessarily taking players in this order. And then you've got Marvin Harrison and you've got Malik Willis. So now you're at 5, and 4 is ahead of 5. So you've got your pick of one of those quarterbacks, Neighbors or Harrison Neighbors. Like that, man, and if you don't want a quarterback, you can trade back another spot or 2, and you can end up with Neighbors or Brock Bowers. Like, whatever.
You say a stacked at QB. I don't know for quarterbacks just yet, but even say Harrison and Neighbors go somehow before the 4, because I think you get Neighbors here, and I'd take Bowers. If they're both gone, you've got the choice of the QB2. Take Bowers. That's solid there compared to the QB2 in this class. I wouldn't blink.
I was in the Dynasty Dummies chat group DM earlier, and I went in and I just finished watching Brock Bowers, and I said, trading for the 104. So do the second one. Trade 108, 202, whatever. 108, 202, and 402. If you can get the 104 for that, absolutely. If you can get the 104 for Flowers, fine too.
212.
I'd do that. Like, I would rather keep Flowers. I would rather give up the 108, 208. I mean, heck, if you have to give up the 108, 208, and 212, like, I'd do that to get up to the 104. Like, whatever. The second round picks don't matter if you can get up to get Neighbors, or even if you can get up to get one of those quarterbacks or Bowers. So again, I was in the Dynasty Dummies group DM. I just finished watching Bowers, and I said, everybody is too low on Bowers. And I was like, I don't have any idea how high anybody is on Bowers, but they're too low.
But they probably,
So he came out with the highest.
I'm excited because same thing, based on what I'm seeing on Twitter, people are liking him, but they're like, where does he fit in? I'm like, this is a small window where I get to be the high guy on the new Kyle Pitts, but
he had the highest grade I've ever given. The highest grade I've ever given.
A very small window where I get to give excitement, like Bowers. Yeah, like top 5 very easily should definitely be there. Now carry on with your story because I actually want to hear it.
So like again, like the highest grade I've ever given out for tight end. So it is Bowers, 1. It is Pitts. It is Andrews. It is Laporta. It is OJ Howard. Forgive me, and McBride.
Never.
So again, higher than Pitts, higher than Andrews, higher than Laporta. Like, this is the highest grade I've ever given out. He can do everything you want as a blocker. He can do more than what you want as a receiver, and he can add yards after the catch. The only thing he can't do is be 2 inches taller. Like, that's literally the only thing that is knocking his profile at all, is that he's not 2 inches taller. It's wild. He's so good.
Kid, this would be the right, like, what I would write in an article, and the thing I would want to have on my resume, just so I'm giving the safest advice. Yeah, you should take the QB if one falls you there. If Neighbors and Harrison are both gone. If it was my team, I'm probably taking Bowers. I'm just laying it out. But you should probably take the QB, solid option. Where you say you're stacked at QB, though, and like that's not what you have shouldn't affect what your value is, but it can definitely, it will on a personal, my teams affect what pick I might make. It wouldn't affect how I value that pick. But yeah,
and maybe the answer is trade into 105. You know what I mean? If you
but honestly, if you trade for the 104 with this, and then trade down one if you really have to, because these are both solid options. Like, I would do either without even thinking about who I'm going to pick yet, because I haven't seen the draft. But I definitely want in the top 5 most years, and so both of these options would be good. But yeah, you could even trade back, or 105 is probably a better type, but not. Why am I dithering here?
So
you don't have to worry about going for the 5 because you should do one of these trades for sure, and then you can think about the 5.
The other thing too, Kid Coop, is if you have the 102 and Neighbors goes, and Harrison goes at 1. Now all of a sudden you have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of the hammer, because there are going to be people that want that quarterback in a super flex league. You might be able to trade back a spot or two and get more and still get Neighbors. And I'm not advocating getting greedy, but that is another move. And if you don't get Neighbors, you still get Bowers. It's not, it's not a loss. Yeah. The fact that you miss out on a great wide receiver and get a great tight end. This class is wild. And it's funny to me that people they're not as excited yet as I think they should be, because this is a rare class where we've got at least 3 quarterbacks that we're interested in. There may be 4. JJ McCarthy, depending on what the NFL does, and you're hearing a lot of buzz around him, there could end up being 4 quarterbacks that we're interested in. Okay. There are 2
in any class, to be clear. That's what he's those 2 would be top 10 in class.
They're both top 10 in wide receivers that I've graded since 2017. 2 guys in one class in the top 10. The only other time that's ever happened was the Jefferson CeeDee Lamb class, who happened to be 1
I
and
have
2.
Rudiger in there too, but yeah, I agree.
So yeah, this is such an obvious, this is so such a good class. And then you have Bowers. So you've got 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks. You've got 2 wide receivers, and you've got Bowers. You're at pick 6 or 7 already before we're even I'm not sure if I like this player. This is a great class. So much fun.
We're out of questions again, so I get to ask one. Brian Thomas and the Vamp, what you think? When I do this stuff, I really don't know much. I know the most popular names that are thrown around. And so sometimes I come across players and I'm like, oh, I haven't heard his name a million times already. Like Harris and Neighbors and Brock Bowers, frankly. So I'm like, no one might know about this guy. And sometimes I get overly hopeful in that regard, because I went deep on his profile. I wrote more words here than I should have. I dug a little bit. And I ended up really liking him. I was like, this might be a guy I like towards the end of the first round, like a worthy that no one else likes. And then I start tuning in to what people actually think. And it's ranked 22nd in the NFL draft. I'm like, fuck. I don't want to pay top 5. No, for Thomas, but I did like his profile quite a lot.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 4. He's my wide receiver 4. So
me too.
Yeah. See, we get this is
got one right.
This is weird to me.
That's what this feels like sometimes. I've answered the questions. I'm looking to check how many I got right.
That's yeah. No, so for me, Thomas is a great deep ball tracker, great at adjusting to throws. He'll make plays back shoulder. He has exceptional sideline awareness and great feet on the boundaries too. So you're talking back shoulder throws. This is a player who gets 2 feet down inbounds, which means he's already thinking about playing at the next level and practicing for being at the next level. He also is very sneaky with the ball once he makes a catch. He's not what I would consider a yards after catch guy, but he's 3 to 5 yards after catch every play. He'll make a catch, and he's so quick to get moving that he catches his defender off guard, and he gets 3 to 5 yards every play. And when he gets a free release from the line of scrimmage, when nobody gets a hand on him, you can't stop it. You just he is such a good route runner and so fast and so big at 6'5", 200 pounds that there's nothing you can do. The thing that is a little bit of a detraction from him. He does sometimes lose separation on deep throws. Sometimes that's his fault. Sometimes that's the quarterback's fault. But he's very good at re-separating, and he can separate vertically. So that's not as big a deal. When he's pressed, he struggles to create separation to draw a throw. So, like if a defender is playing up on him and gets contact initially within 3 to 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, Thomas has trouble. He's not real quick. He's not able to separate. He will go through stretches where he just kind of gets complacent against zone coverage, especially where like he'll go and he'll like make his route. And if the zone defender is there, he's like, yeah, hell with it. I'm just going to sit here. And so you don't love that. And he does let the ball travel into his body, especially when he's playing over the middle. He really tries to like cover himself up, which leads to drops. It leads to the ball traveling in on him. It leads to pass breakups. But I think what he's doing is trying to protect himself from getting that big hit rather than going in to meet the ball and make sure he secures the catch. Like, man, there is so much that you got to love about Brian Thomas. And he did all this, again, like he started off as kind of an afterthought because LSU has been good for such a long time with wide receivers. I mean, he started off in 2021 and you had Chase there in 2022 and Booty was fantastic. And then this year, even with Neighbors kind of emerging as the overall one, he still had a great season in terms of yards, in terms of touchdowns. Like he does a lot of things really well.
He impressed me enough that I invoked the Odell Beckham Jarvis Landry comparison because, like I say, Neighbors is like what was Neighbors? Like what was Neighbors? He's like 3.7 receiving yards team pass. It's Beckham and Landry, but I'm like, but with that going on, Thomas doesn't do a Landry or Odell Beckham, but like Neighbors is actually higher than both in terms of the overall volume of the offense. He's still at 2.8, which is better than everyone else was mentioned so far with Neighbors doing that. Like after that 5, those are the 2 that stand out to me. Like I might be, these might be my misses this year. I don't know. But I'm drawing on them a little bit. It's Worthy and Thomas. I'm like, I kind of want into that tier.
I would love so much to see Brian Thomas land with the Chargers. Like I would love to see him with an offense that's not afraid to go vertically, with a quarterback who's not afraid to throw it up, because he can win so well down the field. And they're kind of in a point where they should be in a market for a receiver. Like, man, that would be fun.
And to emphasize, like he's one of the ones from that tier I was talking about earlier, where I'm like, man, low slot, low A dot, and I'm like, nah, that's one of the few, I'll take my lumps where I do, but he's also one of the reasons where I think Rome is going to get a lot more, or has been so far, getting a little bit more hype for whatever reason, and I can see it. He's in the same tier, but I'm like, if you're going to give me Thomas Worthy for Rome, then I'll do that switch.
Odunze is going to be the consensus one of the wide receiver.
Yeah,
like he will be like that. That's, and he's 5 for me. And it's there's not a lot to choose between those players.
No, it really isn't. Like solid rank. I understand it. But I'm like
he wins at all levels of the field. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. Odunze wins at all levels of the field. He can go high point. He can make contested plays. He can play through contact. He has very good hands, and especially in traffic. Like, I talked about Thomas kind of putting the
and the thing is, Dynasty Coach, it's actually hidden. That's why it's high slot headed up. And like Zach was just saying about the path, like it's that you have to really understand why that last year is the truth, if it is, and dig through it a little bit. But yeah. Quentin Johnson
not
was the
only
opposite. He was
is
bad,
he
hidden, and good.
who the Chargers wanted Quentin Johnston
Yeah.
to be, but like he's actually a better, more versatile player than Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston kind of pitched backwards. Like everyone thought he was a deep threat, and he really wasn't. He's really get him close. He's N'Keal Harry. It's get him close to the line of scrimmage and let him run. But he looks like he should be a deep threat. Exactly, so everyone's like, yeah, we'll throw it deep. Whereas Brian Thomas can get downfield and separate deep. But Odunze, again, wins at all levels of the field. We'll go up high point, make plays through contact. He has very good hands, especially in traffic, where we talked about Thomas kind of alligator arming. Odunze will go and meet the ball, make that play, bring it in, keep his body between the defender and the ball, so he's not the ball's not being knocked away. He plays with really good pace. He's not always going at 100 miles an hour, but he always has a plan. Like you can tell there is intent with his shift in speeds. And so he's doing a lot to set up defenders and then using that burst to get by. And he's actually a much better run blocker than I expected, which is something to kind of, it's funny to think about. But like, to me, that speaks to a receiver who is willing to go and make plays in those kind of dirty areas is a guy that I like.
He's a football player.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
not just a football player, but not necessarily a diva. Like he's willing to go do the things that you need him to do, not just blocking, but you can like run him over the middle, and that mentality kind of carries. He is, though, really bothered by press coverage at the line of scrimmage. Like, there's one thing that he does not like. He does not like contact. Bothered by physicality in route as well. Like, he is not he's don't push me. I don't want to be anywhere near. Yeah. He will be pushed off route. He'll give up off routes. And to me, he's not very sudden off the line of scrimmage or in route. And so, like, he struggles sometimes to separate against man coverage because he's not quick. He doesn't have that, like, quick change of direction. And so, because he doesn't have that shiftiness, sometimes he's covered and has to high point, has to make plays. So, like, those are the downside of Odunze. But, like, he does basically everything pretty well. There's not one thing where you can look at Odunze and be like, oh, he's the best player in the class at this. But if you do like a top 5 players in every category, he's in them.
I hate it when we come to the same place. It's annoying. And this trade's fantastic, by the way, Kate Coop. 109 unlikely for Pittman. All that's fantastic.
Yes.
And yeah. Yo, Zach Gelato, I guess. I would also say, because I'm giving out this as well, like this is a class someone's going to catch a Mike Evans at the end of the first round, and everyone's going to be like, see, don't trade your late first. You should know even if that happens, it's okay.
Are you finally to the point, Peter? Are you finally to the point where you can squint and see that like 2014 comparison? Like it's not, there's no guarantees, but holy cow, the breadth of that second tier is so big of wide receivers. Like there's just so many shots at it.
I am, but I've got to be honest at this point. I don't know if it's I've come to that conclusion or it's just cropped up in other people's comments so much, and where I made an Odell and Landry reference, and there's a Mike Evans or 2 prospect on this class in terms of the role. I think I might have just started to think that way instead of come to that conclusion, if you know what I mean.
Well, either way, but, as long as you're here,
I've started to make the comparison. Fair enough. Dynasty Coach A, I record on a lot of Wednesdays, so I can't always check in, but this has been a great show. Thanks. Thanks for checking it out, ever. Really appreciate
you. Yeah.
Love talking to you. Especially if it's quite a night. Everyone's taking their break for the off season, I hope. And, no.
There is no off season. It's been rookie film since Thanksgiving, Peter.
Yeah, me too, bro. I've been grinding that tape. But I think I'm done for the night. I got plenty I want to ask you about, but I got the Hootenanny where I'm going to catch all of it anyway. So
we got the Hootenanny. We could do a. You and I can do a Crossroads too, if you know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If that's it.
I want to do that. I want to get Travis May on again, but last time I asked, he didn't respond, and he's got another high-profile job. He's forgetting the little guys, I guess. I don't actually know if he can anymore because the higher profile his jobs get, the more
he's doing some real football things, though.
Yeah,
like not like fake football, but like actual
stuff.
Football. Yeah.
So,
all right.
So, but yeah, I definitely want to have you on as well.
We'll
as soon as I get back to regular podcasting. So far, at the moment, I've managed to keep it up just randomly. But the minute I get my schedule back solidly, I'm going to start asking you guys again. It also gives me a chance to actually get my opinions ready as I'm working through this class. So, yeah. That's why I haven't asked yet. One of the many reasons.
Right.
JC Troller says good night.
Yeah, we're going to look over there. And then, except for it's not that.
It's not that, but yeah, look behind you quickly, real quick.